Pop-off makes you think.
I can't believe you just said that.
Pop-off links to lifestyle.
If you're happy, you'll be successful, you'll have the right relationships, and you'll make choices that are healthier for you.
Pop-off makes you smile.
He said, I don't want you pulling his tail or riding him or sitting on him. He said, and if you do that, he said, I will give you a Lassie puppy next year.
Are you serious? Did you? Well, did you get one?
Oh, yes, I did.
And now it's time to pop off with Mary Jane Pop.
And it is that time again. Time for the Pop-Off Radio Show. Got a really good one for you. I always say that, but I really mean it. It's incredible what we're going to be talking about today. A little bit later on, we're into this remote working, and everybody is scratching their head. Is it going to work? And some people don't want to go back to work because they like the remote work. Is it going to be a combination of? Anyway, we're going to talk about surviving remote work. It's a book called, a company, I should say, called Distant Job. And Sharon Koifman is going to zero in on what's going to be happening and how you and I are going to be involved in it. But before we do that, what if I told you that different species may be coming? Another human species. And you're going to go, oh, come on, what are you talking about? You got to listen to this one. We've got genetic engineering. We've got technology to the max. We have artificial intelligence. And then we have the human being. Could they come together? Well, we're going to find out. Stay with us right here on Pop Off.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds.
Well, that strange new world might be coming to our world. So would you believe that the 300,000 years that man has existed, the human species has changed 99% of that time? So how have we changed, and is there more to come? Now, what if I told you there will be the arrival of a new human species? It's called Homo Nouveau. It's new species, new human, as a result of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. And that comes from Dr. Don Simborg, former faculty member at Johns Hopkins and University of California, San Francisco Schools of Medicine. Now comes his scenario in The Fourth Great Transformation and all the medical, legal, scientific, and public policy implications. Dr. Simborg, nice to have you with us on the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so how you got to explain this to me, because obviously I'm not a scientist, and I like to follow some of these things, but it seems a little bit weird. I mean, how are you going to take genetic engineering? And, of course, we have the technology for genetic engineering. We have artificial intelligence. We don't have data from Star Trek yet, but we've got artificial intelligence. And you got, simple human being. How are you going to put all those together?
Well, let me tell you. First, let me just say that right now there's about 7 billion of us Homo sapiens living on Earth. And we are all one species. There's only one species of humans that are left.
Yeah.
Now, if you look back for the total time that we've had humans on Earth, and that's about 2 million years total that there's been some kind of a human, almost all of that time, except for a very short period, there have been more than one human species on Earth.
Really?
We've had many human species. They've had different names. They weren't Homo sapiens, which we are. They were people like Homo ergaster and Homo habilis. The Neanderthals, they were humans, Homo neanderthalensis. So at any given time, if you look back in our history, there were multiple human species living together on Earth, and even sometimes interbreeding, having sex and children with each other.
How are they? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask
Go
you.
ahead.
How are they different?
Well, they were different genetically. That is, if you were able to do a genetic analysis, and by the way, we have been able to do some genetic analyses on some of those extinct species, we know that they had differences in their genes. Now, if you looked at them, you'd also see some differences. For instance, the shape of the skull would look different. The face would look different. The musculature would look different for some of them. But they would be a lot more like us than, say, an ape or a chimpanzee or a gorilla or something. So they would look a lot like Homo sapiens, but you could tell the difference by looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's only been in the last 40,000 years. That sounds like a long time, but in evolution, that's a very short time, that there's only been one species, and that species is us, Homo sapiens.
Okay.
Now, if you look at us, we also look pretty different if you look at different humans around the world.
But our genetic makeup is the same, huh?
There's all kinds of, there's big humans and little humans and dark ones and light ones and different color hairs and eyes. So, again, there's a lot of variation. But we're all one species. Now, why is that? Why don't we call the people from Europe a different species than the people from Africa and so on? The reason is because we all interbreed. That is, we mix our genes constantly. There is no separate genetic group that you could define. No matter how hard you look, we all share the same genetic makeup, and most importantly, we are evolving together, because although we're still evolving, we still have changes in our genes, and we still have mutations and so on. We're constantly changing, but we're also constantly mixing.
Okay.
If you go back about a million years, let's say, that wasn't true. That is, these separate humans that were on Earth were living pretty separately. They didn't come together very often. So over thousands and thousands of years, in their isolated areas, they evolved separately from each other, and they became different species. They had what we called a barrier to reproductive capability. There was reproductive isolation. That is, they didn't come together and mix their genes. Now, back then, even a million years ago, there were not billions of humans. There were only thousands of humans. So they were isolated from each other. Today, we're no longer isolated.
So are you saying those back then, 40,000 years ago or whatever, they couldn't, even if they got together and had sex, they couldn't have babies?
Some of them could. So the barriers that I'm talking about between species are not absolute.
Oh, okay.
Even if you look at, dogs and wolves, those are two different species, but occasionally they can still have offspring together.
Okay.
Many birds species interbreed. But by and large, for most of those species, they stay isolated and stick within their own line. There's this barrier to interbreeding. We do not have that as humans because there's so many of us, and we travel around and we move around and we interbreed. Our genes are constantly mixing. So it's near impossible today, compared to what it was back when we had a lot of human species. It's near impossible today for a new human species to evolve the way we used to evolve, the way everybody has evolved, all species.
I hear a but coming because
yeah. So the but is we are now, because we are such a unique species, we have created these amazing tools that no other species on Earth are able to do because of this amazing brain we've developed. And two of those tools that you mentioned are genetic engineering and artificial intelligence.
Uh-huh.
With genetic engineering, we are purposely altering genes and we're already doing it today in humans. We don't just, have GMOs and genetically modified food and genetically modified some animals. We are now starting to genetically modify humans. Now, we're only doing that in a way that doesn't alter the offspring of any of the humans. And we're only doing it today because we're still very early in genetic engineering. We're not very good at it. There's a lot of problems with it, that we're only doing it in the most serious genetic abnormalities. And
like
we're only doing it
diseases and that type of thing?
Yeah, different diseases. People are born with different genetic diseases, and it's worth the risk if we have a way to correct that gene. And for instance, sickle cell anemia is one of the ones we're making great progress in. It's a very deadly disease in many patients. It's a very painful disease. If you have genes for sickle cell anemia, we now can change those genes.
How?
Because we have tools that we can remove the bone marrow from those patients and take out the cells that produce the red blood cells, which are the ones that are damaged in sickle cell anemia, and we can put into those cells the normal gene that produces normal hemoglobin rather than sickle cell hemoglobin. So we have the ability to do that today. Now, what I'm saying in my book is we're going to get a lot better at this to the point where we will not just try it in the most severe individuals, but I'm saying near the end of this century, so I'm not saying it's tomorrow or the next decade, but probably by the end of this century, we'll start altering what we call the germline. For instance, in vitro fertilization produces fertilized eggs that we're going to implant in a human person. We might want to correct the genes not only for that egg that gets implanted, but in a way that would correct it forever for all the offspring of the future of that person, so that when a normal child is born, when they grow up. So we're going to be doing what I call, and everybody calls, germline genetic engineering by the end of the century. What I'm saying is, when you do that, you then have the ability to not wait for the normal evolution that we've been doing for 4 billion years. We will now change some things in the genome, in our genetics, that will start to present what we call a barrier to interbreeding. That some of the changes will create, if we do, say, thousands or millions of the same genetic engineering to cure some problem in the future that we can't cure today, some of those patients will inevitably not be able to have offspring with people who didn't have that same genetic change.
So that's the Homo nouveau that's coming.
That's how you're going to get a new species. We're going to create a barrier where in the past we've never been able to do that, and in the past it's never happened.
So how does the artificial intelligence work into this?
Well, it's artificial intelligence that's going to make us understand how to do this. That is, genetic engineering, there's two parts of the human body today that are extremely complicated. One is the brain, and we really don't understand the brain yet, and the other is the genome. The genome has 6 billion components to it that if you change just one of them, sometimes you change something very dramatic. Right now, when we try to do this genetic engineering, we aren't very good at it. We're not only changing what we think we're changing, but we're also inadvertently changing lots of other parts of the genome that we don't even know is happening, and we're not even sure what the complications are going to be or what the ramifications will be. I'm saying the only way we're going to learn how to do this in a way that we'll be comfortable doing germline engineering is to use artificial intelligence tools to really be able to analyze these 6 billion building blocks in our genome at the same time that we're trying to alter only one or two of them. It's a very complicated process, and it's going to require a very sophisticated kind of computer intelligence to be able to get us to the point where we're comfortable decades from now doing germline engineering. So it's artificial intelligence is going to enable this advanced genetic engineering tool to the point where we'll start doing it routinely. We'll be doing millions of them in countries all over the world every day, and that's how we are going to end up creating a new human species.
Now, will that Homo nouveau look different than the Homo sapiens?
No, you won't. You will not. In fact, if you were ever present in the past when a new human species was being evolved in the old-fashioned way by what we call Darwinian evolution, you also would not be able to tell the difference in a short period of time. And when I say short period, hundreds and thousands of years. In that period of time, the new species would look to, for all intents and purposes, if you looked at them, exactly the same as the old. And that's true whether it's a human or it's a dog or an insect or a plant or a tree. So when Homo nouveau arrives, at first you won't be able to tell the difference unless you did very sophisticated genome analysis. Then you could tell the difference. But externally, you wouldn't. And in fact, those people, they would still talk the same, eat the same food, they'd intermingle with you. The only difference would be most of the time, almost all the time, when they had sex together and had children, they would miscarry. The fertilized egg would not carry. And at first, they wouldn't even notice that for a while. It won't be until there's thousands and millions of these people that have had the same genetic change that it will become apparent that there is some kind of barrier to interbreeding, and they are a new species. They're not intermingling anymore. Their genomes are not mixing like they are today. That's how it's going to happen.
Yeah, but that's going to be pretty frustrating for people because they won't know why what's happening to them is happening.
Well, they could know that at that time, you'll be able, just like today, you can get a genome analysis.
Yeah, but right now...
50 or 100 years from now, you'll also be able to tell. You'll be able to know. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could do genetic engineering that is, suppose you wanted to marry and have a child with a Homo sapien. You could do genetic engineering during in vitro fertilization and correct it.
I know,
so
but
it won't be absolute.
Because right now, when people want to get together, say they want to get a marriage license, all you need is a blood test.
Yeah, that's right. That's now. In the future, that's probably going to change.
Okay. So then, in other words, they could come back and say, well, you know, you're Homo nouveau and you're Homo sapiens, and at least no, you're not going to have kids.
You're not going to likely have a normal childbirth. You're probably going to have a miscarriage. And it's possible, if you wanted, we will be able to correct that at that time. If you wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. So will we get along? I mean, I almost see another kind of like, I'm a Homo nouveau, you're a Homo sapiens, I don't like you.
That's possible. It's probably, at first, people aren't going to look different, they're not going to act different, they're not going to be different.
But they are different.
They are genetically different. And today, we're also genetically different from no two humans have the same genetic makeup today. So So people mix today that have totally different genetic makeups, and they will continue then. So there's now, over millions of years, it's quite possible that one line, this Homo nouveau line, will start getting other kinds of genetic changes that Homo sapiens doesn't. They could differentiate to a point where it will be more apparent and more visible. But believe me, that's going to take millions of years for that to be noticeable.
It's so
it isn't
crazy.
going to happen.
I mean, they're arguing enough about things like abortions and all this, and now we're talking about ethical and legal issues to the max.
Yes, we are. I mean, it's certainly going to be a different world then, and it's going to be different now, but we'll adjust to it. Then it'll seem normal. Just as today, we're all mixing genetic differences together, except we're not having any barrier to reproduction today that I predict. Now, this is just a prediction. It isn't, everything in the book is science. This is not a science fiction book.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm speculating that because of this ability of ours to do something that hasn't been available over the 4 billion years of evolution, that's going to create a different kind of genetic change that we haven't seen in the past, that will create a barrier to some people having sex, or not having sex. They could have sex, but they won't have normal offspring. They won't be able to carry a normal pregnancy in the same way as they could today.
So what's the benefit?
There is no benefit.
It just is.
It isn't going to be done because of that. The benefit will be whatever the other reason they were having genetic engineering in the first place. That's what the benefit is. Suppose we had a way to genetically prevent aging, let's say,
mm-hmm.
or maybe that's a little strong, maybe Alzheimer's disease. Let's suppose 50, 100 years from now, we can genetically prevent any gene that could cause Alzheimer's disease. And if millions of people do that, as they may very well, that's the benefit. Only it may also, at the same time, create a barrier. And it won't be known at first whether that's happening or whether it happens at all. It may take dozens of years before it finally becomes clear that this group of people that had this particular benefit from some kind of a routine, it'll be as routine as any other procedure today is. When they find that out, only then will we be able to say there's a group of people here that can only reproduce, have normal childbirth and pregnancies with people who have had a similar genetic engineering change. So the benefit isn't the fact that they've become unable to create. That obviously is not a benefit, it's a harm. The benefit is whatever the genetic engineering change that created it in the first place, that'll be the benefit.
So will Homo sapiens eventually become extinct?
Not necessarily. Now keep in mind, 99.9% of all species that ever lived have become extinct.
Okay.
So it's likely we're going to become extinct, but it won't be because of what I'm talking about. There'll be some other reason it will become extinct. I mean, the odds are very high that we're not, after 4 billion years, hardly any species has survived, even though it looks like there's a lot alive today. It doesn't compare to how many have already gone extinct. So clearly, Homo sapiens has a high probability that one day, for whatever reason, will go extinct. And there's many, many possible reasons.
Gotcha. But it doesn't mean humanity doesn't go on. It just changes.
It means there'll be different kinds of humans. They won't be Homo sapiens, perhaps.
Uh-huh.
But by that time, there'll be more than, it won't be just Homo nouveau. There'll be other kinds of humans as well. So there could be many humans. On the other hand, it is possible that something will wipe out all humans.
Oh.
Keep in mind, we've wiped out all humans in the past except for one. I mean, we've had dozens of humans in the past, different human species, and they've all been wiped out except for the one that happens to be alive today. And it's almost an accident that we're the one that's alive.
It's amazing.
And it's quite possible. And other lines have gone extinct. You know, the dinosaurs went extinct. You know, there's many different lines you can go back. In fact, most of them have gone extinct.
Gotcha.
And it's possible, and I'd say it's likely, and I don't know when that would be. It could be another million years. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's
I'm going to have
likely.
to come back and check it out. That's all there is to it. Now, do you have a website?
Yes, I do. You can go to www.thefourthgreattransformation.com.
Great.
And you can read a lot more detail and so on.
Super. I hope you come back and visit again, will you?
Well, I'd love to.
Fantastic.
Okay.
This is a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And, hey, I'm looking forward to it, except I probably won't be here when it happens.
Neither of us will. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll cure aging by that time.
Hopefully.
Some people think we will.
I love it. Well, they'll have to talk about that one the next time. How's that?
Okay, we can do that.
Thanks so much, Dr. Simborg.
All right, good talking to you.
Same here. Dr. Don Simborg, it's Simborg, The Fourth Great Transformation. And you can go to thefourthgreattransformation.com and get more information. The new human? Who knows? I love talking about this. Anyway, stay with us. More coming your way. We're going to be talking about surviving that remote work.